possibly went to court.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending the webinar, Handling TennCare Appeals. We've been having some phone issues today, so I want to make sure that you can hear me all right. If you would send a little message to me in using the chat box, that would be great, so I can know if everybody can hear me. We'll get started here in just a minute. This is working. Okay. Let's see, no one's responding, so I don't know if they can hear me or not. Yeah.
gonna switch to this.
See if we can.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your participant ID. You have entered the meeting as a panelist. Attendees can now hear you speak.
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for coming to the webinar today. We're going to get started. We're going to talk about appeals today, best practices really for handling them. So my name is Rob Watkins. I'm one of the staff attorneys at the TJC, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the appeal process. We'll be talking about how to apply for TennCare and the rules that involve that and timelines. And then also going to have with me today Lauren McBride. Lauren is the Melkus Fellow at the TJC. She's a client advocate, and she handles a lot of cases, especially immigrant pregnant women. But she's going to walk us step by step, actually about how to fill out the form so that you have a better idea of what to do. So we're going to go ahead and get started with what it really means today. And we're going to talk about applying for TennCare. We're going to talk about the timelines and the deadlines that go right along with it. We're going to talk about the different types of appeals that are available. We're also going to talk about the step-by-step. Lauren's going to walk you really through that, how to complete those forms for the various types of appeals. And then we'll talk about what to do once you have a decision, what that follow-up really needs to look like. So let's first talk about applying for TennCare. And the state has certain responsibilities. And number one, anybody can apply for TennCare. So you could be Bill Gates, and if you lived in Tennessee and you decide you want to apply for TennCare, you could. And you don't really have to prove your eligibility to apply. So in other words, you can just say, I would like to apply for TennCare, I'd like to apply for benefits, without saying, I want to apply as a caretaker relative, and here's how I believe I'm eligible as a caretaker relative. The state will still ask additional questions. We'll still want to know other information like your income, family size, make that determination, but you don't have to prove that when you want to apply. However, as an enrollee or as an applicant, you do have certain duties that you have to do. It's mainly reporting. You need to report change of address or change in income, your household size, employment status, or access to insurance. Those are the things you would have to report a change to them, and that needs to be reported within 10 days. Basically, it's anything having to do really that might affect your coverage. So if you're already on TennCare, it might make you no longer eligible, or it could be you've applied, you're waiting for a decision, and now maybe you had an increase in income and now you're no longer eligible. So that's the reason why they need to know what's going on. When you think of household size, think of, if you had people entering the household or leaving. So in other words, a family could get divorced. You could have a child being born. You could have a death in the family that could affect the household size. So when it comes to applying for TennCare, really about anybody can help when it comes to submitting an application. So an applicant can submit it, or a parent can do it on behalf of a child. A legal guardian or conservator can do it. An authorized representative, so in other words, the authorized rep forms that someone might complete and send into TennCare. If you've used TennCare Connect at all, there's a place for you to list an authorized representative. Or if somebody is incapacitated, maybe they're a minor or they're incapacitated at a hospital, then all you really need is someone acting responsibly for the applicant. That's all that's really needed. So, for example, a hospital staff member could help somebody apply if they were unconscious and at the emergency room. So once you apply, then TennCare has to make a determination or a disposition of that eligibility. And I really want to point out a rule change that just went into effect at the end of August. Eligibility is determined based on information contained on the valid application as well as information secured during the application process. And that's important because it's a rule change. The old rule, instead of requesting a valid application, said it had to be a completed application. And a completed application meant that all the blanks, all the fields had been completed on the application. It is signed and dated by the applicant, and it also included all the supporting documentation. With a valid application, as is defined, really it only needs to be signed by the applicant and include their contact information. So this is going to allow you to establish or submit a valid application, and that's important because the effective date for almost all categories of TennCare is going to be the date of application, so the date that that valid application was submitted. So once they have the valid application in, they make a determination, and there's only two possible outcomes. You're either approved or you're denied. So obviously you meet all the eligibility factors, your application should be approved. But if you fail to meet one of those factors, then you will be denied. But there's also two other ways that you can be denied or have your application denied. And one is failing to respond to requests for verifications or requests for more information to help TennCare make that determination. Usually that's proof of income, especially for individuals whose income varies. They might, hours might fluctuate week to week, or they might be seasonal. Chances are those types of individuals will receive an income verification request. It could also be for citizenship. Usually that's dealing with immigration status for immigrants. Rarely, but from time to time, we'll see some requests for proof of citizenship from U.S. Citizens. But it's usually going to be for immigrants. And then also you can be denied if you fail to provide sufficient information regarding those requests. So really, an application doesn't stay pending for very long. They're going to make an eligibility determination. You're either going to be approved or you're going to be denied. That's for applications. When we think of redeterminations, what we're really talking about is the annual renewal process. And so by federal law, all Medicaid categories of TennCare, those enrollees must have their eligibility redetermined every 12 months. And this is a question that comes up quite frequently that we'll get that says, well, does TennCare do all the redeterminations in January? Do they start at the beginning of the year? And actually the way it works is it's going to be 12 months from the date the individual is determined eligible. That's usually the date it's going to be. So if I were to apply for TennCare in September and get approved for it, then I can probably count on being or receiving the redetermination packet somewhere in September of 2020. So when you help somebody apply and they become eligible, once they have that eligibility and receive their cards, you can pretty much count on about 12 months from then is when they're going to get that redetermination packet in the mail. So with redeterminations, the state has certain requirements that it must do. And one is an ex parte review, and that's just really saying that the state is going to really look at information it already has to see if it can actually make a determination of eligibility. And this really applies to people that are receiving SNAP or supplemental nutrition benefits, or what is formerly known as food stamps. And so the state already has their information from that SNAP application, so they really can't ask for information from, for example, a TennCare enrollee that's also receiving SNAP that should be also automatically populated to the redetermination packet. But for most individuals, if they're on SNAP, they'll probably be determined as being eligible and not actually receive a packet. If they do receive a packet, it should be pre-populated with the information the state already has. So the other requirement the state has is it has to allow the enrollee to provide what might be missing from that redetermination package. They must be afforded opportunity to do that. They also must provide in-person or phone assistance. If they're having difficulty completing the application or not understanding, they should be able to receive help from the state, either in person or by phone, when it comes to completing the packet. And then once the packet has been completed and filled out, then they need to check them for all open categories of TennCare or open categories of Medicaid. So, for example, someone might have been on a Medicaid as a pregnant woman, and now they're no longer pregnant, so they wouldn't be eligible under that category, but they might be eligible as a caretaker relative. So before they could actually terminate them from TennCare because they're no longer qualified for the pregnancy category, they would need to screen them for a caretaker relative as well as other categories. If for some reason they're no longer eligible for TennCare, all right, they need to check other insurance affordability programs like Cover Kids or premium tax credits and cost sharing reductions. And with regard to the latter, they need to send electronically that application that they received. It needs to be sent on to the marketplace for the marketplace to make that determination for PTCs and CSRs. Prior to the rollout of TEDS, we don't believe this was happening, but since then, we believe when somebody does apply and they're no longer eligible for TennCare, that is being forwarded to the marketplace. It's a little bit slow, but the marketplace should be sending letters to the individual about that application. Then, of course, at the end, when the state makes that determination of whether or not they're still eligible for TennCare or whether they'll be eligible for something, another category, they need to notify the enrollee of what that determination was. So let's talk about some just general practice tips. So we suggest saving copies of all applications or the renewal packet if you're helping somebody go through the redetermination process, including the envelope, just in case it might be postmarked as when it was mailed by TennCare. A lot of times it won't have the postmark date on it, but if the individual just writes the date on the envelope when they received it, that could be particularly helpful if that would be an issue later on. When it comes to sending in any information in TennCare, so it could be the renewal packet, it could be responding to a verification request, we want to save proof of that transmission. So if it's been mailed, we'll want to have a certified mail receipt showing that actually that the enrollee or the applicant mailed in the information to TennCare. If it's by phone, it's always a good idea to record not only the date and time, but also the representative that you spoke to on the telephone, because all those calls are going to be recorded, and it just makes it easier to go back and find a transcript if that would be an issue. So, for example, you have to call, even if you have a TennCare Connect account, if you were to move and you need to update your address information, you should be able to do that via the TennCare Connect portal. Last time we checked, that was not available, and they were telling people to call. So if you were to call TennCare, for example, and indicate, I've actually moved, it's a good idea to obviously record the date and time and the individual you spoke to. The purpose of that call, we want to do that because if there's no record of it and can't find a record of it, we might need that to prove that actually we told TennCare and they still sent maybe a notice to a wrong address. And that would have, obviously, ramifications affecting their appeal. If you are using TEDS to apply or submit information, the TennCare Connect portal, we suggest taking a screenshot of anything that you upload, including when you submit the application, just in case for some reason or another it doesn't appear on their account. So let's talk a little bit about creating a TennCare Connect account and linking a case. So if you've not done that, it's pretty simple. You can Google TennCare Connect or go to the TennCare website. You're going to see a page similar to this. It says Welcome to TennCare Connect. And you'll see there's a couple options down at the bottom, and you can create a TennCare Connect account by clicking on the appropriate link at the bottom. You will need a valid email address for verification purposes, and I think as a best practice, it's probably a good idea with, of course, the applicant's permission to also record that information so that you can help monitor their account for any verification requests they may receive. So once you create the account, you'll kind of be taken to a My Applications page. This is where somebody can, if they haven't applied, they can actually apply for benefits. There's a link for it. But also, if they're already enrolled into a program or submitted an application, chances are you're going to be able to link their application or link to their case with TennCare. So once you click on that link, you'll be taken to this page, and it's one for collecting information. So even if you were to apply on using TennCare Connect, there's no guarantee that you'll be automatically linked to your account. So it's always a good idea to go ahead and verify that, and if not, try to link that prior application. And the easiest way to do that is by giving them personal information, which is going to be the date of birth and the Social Security number. You'll also notice that you can submit the person's TennCare ID number. The problem there is unless they've received a letter in the mail, chances are they're not going to have that ID number. If you help them apply, a lot of times you'll get an application number that starts with a T. That is not the same as the personal ID number. The other thing is usually people are going to remember their Social Security number and their date of birth. They're probably not going to remember their TennCare ID number. So I want you to that you can kind of link to a case, and you're going to be able to really access letters. So a letter that's sent by TennCare to the applicant should be made available online. You'll notice that if you'll see it is say that letters, about eligibility or about renewals or appeals should be available. So not necessarily everything, but the vast majority of things should be available here. And you're going to be able to access that by clicking on the letters icon that you'll see on the right side of the screen. Once you're taken to that page, you're going to notice that there's the ability to search for a variety of different letters that a person might receive. You can actually get all of them. You can get eligibility, or you can actually get appeals. The thing to really kind of note here is, sorry about that, that it might take about 24 hours or so before that letter actually hits. So when you apply, let's say there might be some questions about income, they're going to generate a verification letter that's going to be sent to the individual. So once that letter has been generated, within about 24 hours or so, they should populate, and that letter should be made available online for you to see it. So it's not going to happen immediately. That's why, as a best practice approach, anybody that you help apply, I would help establish a TennCare Connect account, and I would check it really daily to see if anything's been posted to their account that they need to be aware of. You'll do notice that there is a begin date and end date for kind of a search range. Probably not that important this year, but in coming years it might be important to kind of weed out the types of information that you're really looking for. On the My Letters page, you'll get something like this that indicates maybe the type of correspondence being sent. And if you click on the magnifying glass on the right, you will be able to actually see and read the letter that's being sent to the individual. So now let's talk about the important timelines and deadlines. So when it comes to applying, you submit the application. That triggers really kind of the first deadline. And so federal law requires that TennCare determine a person's eligibility with reasonable promptness. And that's really defined as 45 days from the date of application for most Medicaid categories, including CHIP, but 90 days for the Choices program, so it's actually double. And that's really because for Choices, there is a medical review or medical condition part of the process when it comes to eligibility. I always like to think of Choices as there's the medical review. Do you meet the medical standard of care needed for Choices? And then there's also a financial review. So it's kind of really a two-part process, and that's why it's really 90 days or why it's longer. For most TennCare categories, though, it's just simply who's in the household, and it's going to be looking at income for members of the household. It doesn't really involve a medical review, so it's going to be shorter. So with regard to denials and terminations, I want you to think of the 20-10-40 rule. If you kind of keep these numbers straight in your head or just print off this slide when we distribute it, I think you may find it helpful. So let's first talk about 20. So individuals that apply or go through the redetermination process, if their TennCare is going to be terminated, they will be notified 20 days prior to that termination date. Okay, so we're going to send a notice saying that we're going to take an adverse action against, against your coverage, and they're going to be notified of that. Other thing to know about 20 days is any verification requests that will be sent by the state, sent by TennCare to the individual, whether they're an enrollee or the applicant, is going to give them 20 days. That includes the mail time, the time it takes for TennCare to mail it, in order for them to return the information that's been requested. Okay. Now, this is a good rule change that's gone on because under the old rules, an individual only had 10 days from the time that they received a request for verification to send that information in. So as you can imagine, a letter generated on a Friday that maybe gets mailed late in the day, Monday's a legal holiday, it might take 5 or 6 days before it actually shows up in the enrollee's mailbox or the applicant's mailbox, giving a really short period of time to really get the information needed. Now it's been bumped to 20 days, which is very helpful. And that 20-day time frame is going to run from the date that is on that verification request. So if you think back to the best practices when you create the TennCare Connect account, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go in there and check to see if any verification letters have been sent. Because if they have, we can open it up and take a look at it and see what is the date on it. So you can actually give yourself or give the enrollee, the maximum amount of time available for them to try to find the information, especially if it's proof of income and they've got to go track down pay stubs, for example, or get a letter from an employer. You're going to give them those extra days. So chances are you're going to be able to see it on the TennCare Connect portal a lot sooner than the individual actually receives the letter in the mail. When it comes to the 10, so 20, 10, 40, the 10 is for continuation of benefits. So an enrollee can receive continuation of benefits if an appeal is filed within 10 days of the date of the notice of action. So I'm going to be terminated. I'm going to have 10 days to submit an appeal, and Lauren's going to talk about how we request continuation of benefits. It's not automatic. You have to ask for it, but you want to do that as soon as possible so that you can, so the individual who already has TennCare can keep it until the determination is actually made or decision is made on the hearing. This also could be for a medical service appeal. Let's say somebody's going to get a cut in their nursing hours, for example. You can request continuation of benefits, and they're going to actually keep what they had before that cut goes into effect until that determination is made. Which brings us to 40. All right, so 40 days, that is the deadline to file an appeal and request a hearing. Okay, so that's 40 days. It includes the mailing of the date of the intended action. All right, so I'm going to be terminated. I've got 40 days to submit my appeal. All right, so I may not get it in within 10 days. That's okay. I might not get continuation of benefits, but I can still request an appeal of that decision. So let's talk about redeterminations or the renewal process. It's a little bit different. Here I want you to think of the 40-20-90 rule, okay? And for this one, they have 40 days to return a completed renewal packet, inclusive of mail time from the date the packet is sent to the enrollee. So the date that's on the packet that's being mailed to them. All right, so they have 40 days to complete it and send it back to TennCare. The 20 days. So you send in the renewal packet, just like an application. They might ask to verify some of the information contained in it. Proof of income, for example. So the verification request will provide the enrollee with 20 days, inclusive of the mail time, to submit information. So just like an application, they request more information, you're going to have 20 days to submit that information to them. It's interesting, it's in the rules, but if, for example, a verification request goes out and they don't respond within 20 days, but before they get notice of that adverse action, they actually do respond and send that information back in, TennCare will still review it. So also, like applications, before they're going to be terminated, they're going to be sent a notice, and that notice will be sent 20 days ahead of time, letting them know that they're going to lose their TennCare. Once again, real important to monitor verification requests, monitor their the TennCare Connect account, because a lot of times they might get a request for verification. You might, for example, upload those documents to TennCare, and for some reason or another, or fax them in, they don't make it to its final destination. And then here comes the notice saying, hey, we're going to terminate you because you didn't respond and send the information that we needed. And that's when you would be able to obviously file an appeal, in this case, for example, continuation of benefits, and you could actually prove, because you saved proof of the information you sent back in, proof that you actually faxed it, or have that screenshot showing that it was there. So one thing I will kind of note, and Lauren will mention it, whenever you get a verification request, that initial page is going to contain a QR code or a barcode, a little square code that's going to be on the page that they get that has the instructions. And they're going to be told that that page needs to be sent back along with, you know, their date of birth and their ID number on it. The thing to keep in mind is that needs to be the first page of anything that you fax to them or that you upload via TennCare Connect. And that's because a live person is not looking at it. They're not going to the fax machine and pulling the paper off. Instead, it's being done electronically. And what it's looking for is that barcode. And if it finds that barcode, chances are it can link it to the case. However, if it's not the first, or it gets stuck to another page, they can't find that barcode, even though it's been received, it might not make it to its final destination, and meaning to the person's account. If it doesn't go to the account, likely they're going to be terminated or receive that termination notice in the mail. 90 days. Okay. So individuals may submit a renewal packet or additional information that's requested up to 90 days after termination of eligibility. So let's say they got the renewal packet, they didn't fill it out and send it in within the 40 days, or maybe they didn't receive the renewal packet at all. All right. Then they find out, let's say they go to the doctor and they find out, oh, I didn't send it within the 40 days and I got terminated. They can still submit a renewal packet. They could call TennCare, request another renewal packet, which I believe they will send to them. And then as long as it's within 90 days of that termination date, they can submit that information, that packet to them. And if they do, individuals terminated for failure to respond and subsequently are determined eligible. So in other words, they look at what's in the packet and say, yeah, you are still eligible for TennCare. Then they will have their eligibility reinstated as of the date of termination. So this should remove any gap in coverage. So, you know, they get terminated, there's this 90-day reconsideration period. That's outlined in the rules that I've cited for you here. It's also part of the federal rules. Then they're going to actually still act on that redetermination packet. However, packets are received 90 days after that date of termination will not be considered, and that means you're really going to have to help the individual reapply for coverage at that point in time. So let's talk about the appeal process. We're going to talk about the types, but I also want to talk about, first of all, who can help with an appeal or a hearing. So if you want to help somebody file an appeal, the applicant can do it, or his representative can do it. They can help them file the appeal, or they can actually help them at the hearing. And the rule also defines what that is, and I want to point out that a representative is an individual organization, including legal counsel, a relative, a friend, or another spokesperson, as long as they're authorized by the appellant or the person filing the appeal to help them during the appeal. So, if you ever wanted to practice law without a license, now's your chance. The federal rules specifically allow anybody to help with these types of appeals and hearings, and TennCare also goes along with those rules. So you can help somebody. You don't necessarily need to be a lawyer. So let's talk a little about the types of appeals. And the first one I'm going to talk about are medical service appeals. This isn't necessarily something that I'm going to spend a lot of time on, but I really want you to just take a couple of things away from it so that if you encounter this, you can help somebody or at least get it to an organization like us or legal aid that might be able to help with the services appeal, because there you really will want to be represented by, or you really won't want to be represented by a lawyer. This is going to typically show up as a denial of medicine or denial of treatment or a medical service. You know, doctor says it's medically necessary that the patient receives this medicine the MCO doesn't want to pay for, or they want to try a different type of medicine first. That would give rise to a medical service appeal. You could have a reduction in home health hours. Let's say they're receiving 80 hours of nursing care in their home, and now the MCO wants to cut them back to 30. All right, so this is also a result in a medical services appeal. And there, you definitely want to file that within 10 days of that notice of adverse action, so that you can keep it during the appeal process. And it can also apply to something like a missing nursing shift. They were supposed to show up on Monday. They didn't show up, so I'm going to file an appeal. They didn't show up Tuesday. Every missed nursing shift can give rise to an appeal. All right. Now, here's the main thing I want you to take away from it. All right. So it needs to be medically necessary service or medicine that a person's receiving. And the best evidence you're going to have from that is going to come from the enrollee's treating physician. All right. Now, his decision for this, for this service or medicine being medically necessary needs to be supported by clinical or laboratory findings that are derived from the examination of the enrollee or the enrollee's medical records. So you really want the doctor to say, based on the examination I've done and based on the lab reports and testing we have done, it's my professional opinion that this person needs X, and needs this type of medicine, and needs this type of service, okay? Now, if it goes to a hearing, obviously, you're going to need somebody to testify to that. And you can get a little pushback from doctors, right, to keep a busy schedule. A lot of times these hearings are, in a 3-hour window block when it's going to be. You don't know when the call's actually going to come in. But remember that, the doctor can testify at a hearing, but he can also submit a letter supporting it, or more importantly, a declaration. So it's not necessarily that they have to appear at a hearing, and that's the main takeaway from this. But if you do want to submit a letter that supports that or a declaration, you're going to definitely want the help of counsel to put that together. And that is something really the TJC can help you with. So let's just talk about the types of appeals in general, ones that you're most likely going to encounter. And the first one is going to be a delay appeal. So you're going to file a delay appeal when TennCare fails to make that determination of eligibility within either 45 days or 90 days, okay? The effective date of coverage is going to be when the person first attempted to apply. So we always try to look for that earliest possible application and to see if the person's actually, or TennCare's actually made a determination based on that, okay? Once again, it's going to be real important to save any proof that you've uploaded something to TennCare Connect or faxed in an application. You want to have proof that the application was made. So you can establish that, in fact, you applied on this date and they haven't made a determination within the 45 or 90 days. Then there's the eligibility appeal. And this is when TennCare denies or terminates an application or a renewal, okay? So let's say that you apply for TennCare and, you know, they requested verification. You didn't submit, you submitted the verification in within the time frame, but they didn't link it to the account. Now they terminated you, even though, or denied the application, even though the whole 45 days have not run yet. That becomes an eligibility appeal and not a delay appeal. So anytime they deny or terminate coverage, deny an application, you can appeal immediately. You don't have to wait 45 days to do that. The other one's going to be effective date appeal, and this is when the coverage start date is incorrect. This happens quite frequently. Sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to the date that they pick, but you really want to look at when did that applicant submit that valid application, and because that's really the date we want to get. We want to get if we can, because in all likelihood the individual is going to have medical bills that need to be covered, right? So those are the types of appeals, and I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to really talk about how do we file an appeal and go about it step by step.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I'm the Memphis Fellow at the Tennessee Justice Center, which means I do a lot of our client advocate work. So I'm going to go through my best practices and suggestions on how to file an appeal step by step. So just in general, for any of the three types that Rob just went over, the steps are going to be step 1, completing the appeal form, step 2, what to include, so extra documents with that appeal form, and step 3, anticipating the state's response. So for all of these, I am going to talk about mostly how to send it as a fax. You can also call and do an appeal over the phone, and I would suggest then sending the step 2 and step 3 parts as an addition, but if you do it as a fax, you kind of keep everything together and can have written proof of what you had submitted. So I think it's the best way to do it. So first we'll look at how to file a delay appeal, and again, that's an appeal where someone applied and didn't hear back within 45 days or 90 days for choices. So again, it's the same 3 steps. And the first step is completing the appeal form. So this might come with the letter that someone receives. It's a termination issue. They'll say, go here and find this appeal form, but also if you just do a quick Google search of TennCare eligibility appeal form, it should pop up right away. It's on their website under how to file an eligibility appeal. And it is a little confusing that it says eligibility appeal because you can also do effective date appeal and delay appeal with the same form. And so since we're doing a delay appeal form with this one, this is the very first page. So I have a form that has been filled out with all the information, just kind of a sample idea. First part, who is the person that wants to appeal? So just whoever you're helping out with the situation. I did Jane Doe, date of birth, social security number, mailing address, and then what language do you speak best? Number 2, are there other people in your household who have the same problem? So in this example, say Jane Doe applied for herself and her son for coverage, and both of them haven't received any response on their application. You would put down the additional person, include their date of birth and social security number. Next, number 3, who filled out this form? If it's just the person that it had applied and doing it for themselves, they don't have to fill this part out. But since I'm a representative, I put in my information and I check the little box that says, are you an advocate or a friend? What kind of coverage is this appeal for? I just arbitrarily chose TennCare for this one. Obviously, you would choose whichever box is relevant to the application. Number 5, what is the problem you are having? I left it blank for this form just to show that it depends on what type of appeal you're filing for. Number 6, have you or anyone in your household appealed this problem before? Yes or no, depending on the answer. 7, tell us why you want to appeal this problem. So you could include a short paragraph in this section. I always include an attached kind of long paragraph with all the details possible, and just right here, please refer to included letter that details reasons for this appeal. Okay, this part's really important. Number 8, has your coverage ended? Is your coverage ending? This is where you mark on the appeal form, yes, I want continuation of benefits. I always just check it, even if it's a delay appeal or something, just so that it's been marked. And then once you have this form, you'll move on to the next parts. And since we're talking about a delay appeal specifically right now, what is the problem you're having? You would mark, my application has not been processed in 45 days or 90 days for choices. So once you fill out that appeal form, then you want to gather the rest of the materials that you're going to have for your fax. So that would be personal barcode, if you have that, fax page, the appeal form, brief explanation of the fax, and then authorization of representative organization. So whenever you send information to TennCare, Rob talked about this briefly, but it's super important to include this little square that comes on the letters, because that allows the computer to automatically put it linked to the correct case. If you just send a fax that says this is for Jane Doe, her date of birth, all that, it can get lost or take a long time to be found. So I put this as the very first page every single time, and I'll write on it still the person's name, their date of birth, and their social security number. But whenever I send something, if you have this, it's really great to put it there so that you make sure it gets to the right place. With delay appeals, if it's the person's first time applying to TennCare, they aren't necessarily going to have this, which is fine. You'll just lead with the fax page. So if you do have the barcode, the fax page would be second. But if you don't have the barcode, then have the fax page as the first one. And fill it out to TennCare appeals, put in their information on the from side, whatever the advocate's information is. And then I always write filing A, in this example, delay appeal for the person, their date of birth, their social security number, and also their person ID if you have that information. And that's super important if you don't have the barcode to make sure that it goes into the right case. Next, after you have the barcode and the fax form, you'll put the appeal form in there. We just went through this, but again, for a delay appeal, remember that you're marking, my application has not been processed in 45 days. So then after that, I always include a typed page with an explanation of the facts. To the best of my knowledge, you want to make sure that you're representing everything accurately into what you know. I usually include it on our letterhead or just print out a piece of paper. So for a delay appeal, this is kind of a sample of what I would normally say. Dear TennCare Appeals Unit, I'm writing to file a delay appeal on behalf of our client. I have her name, date of birth, social security number. She's eligible for Cover Kids as a pregnant woman. Her household consists of herself and her fetus. She has no income. She applied for Cover Kids on June 4, 2019. She's not received a decision on her application. I've included with this email her proof of application, proof of pregnancy, proof of income, and proof of ID with the associated fact sheets. And then I'll put however long it's been. It's been more than 2 months since Ms. Doe applied for Cover Kids. Please expedite review of her application and ensure that her coverage begins on whatever date her application was from. So things to note on this is that I don't just say when the application was and how long it's been. I also go ahead and point out why we believe that the client is eligible. So I included household size, her income, what category she's eligible for, just really spelling it out so that it's all included when you send it. Ooh. The last thing to include, assuming that you have it, is the authorized representative form. So just filling it out with the client's information on the front, your information on the back. Make sure that if it's for a minor child, the parent signs on the bottom of the second page. You'd be surprised how many times I've gotten the form back where the child signed because they're 12, 13, and the parent was just filling it out quickly. TennCare will not allow that to work. They won't let you talk to them about any of the information. So just double check when you get those forms and you're sending them that the parent did sign and not the child. And then the last step, step 3, anticipating the state's response. So my motto and the whole concept of even having this third step is do their job for them. What that means is I give as much information to TennCare as I can to prevent them reaching back out to me, asking for more information, or just having the whole process take longer than it needs to by giving them additional information to speed up the process. So in general, that means including proof of application, proof of income, proof of citizenship. If it's cover kids, you don't need to prove citizenship for certain situations, but you should include a proof of identity, so like a photo ID or a green card, or last one would be pregnancy confirmation, obviously, if that is relevant. And on each of these, it's super important to have them labeled. So every single time I send one of these, I put the name, the date of birth, the social security number if you have it, person ID if you have it, the item description. So I will write actually on the top of it, proof of application, proof of income, just being super clear about what it is. And then at the bottom, always put page 1 of however many it is, in case, say, you're sending pay stubs. They don't just see the first page and not realize that you sent 5 pages of pay stubs. Here's a sample proof of application. This is just a fax receipt, has the date that it was sent to show what day the Cover Kids application was submitted. You'll see at the top, some of the information is blocked out for patient privacy, but the name, the date of birth, and then we wrote proof of application. This individual didn't have a social security number or a person ID yet, so that wasn't included, but if you have it, definitely include it. And then you can't see it, but at the bottom it says page 1 of, I think, 16, because they included the whole application. Next, proof of income. These are different types of income and proof. You want to include pay stubs from the past 8 weeks if you can, or a letter from your employer. If you're self-employed, copies of your latest tax returns or bank statements, social security payments, unemployment, or just any other income. So if you have a client who has no income, you still should submit something, and you have to still submit something if TennCare requests it. So I always have my clients write just a brief note. As you can see, this one says proof of income. I have been unemployed since March 17th, 2019. I left due to XYZ issue. And then really important, make sure that they sign it. It has to be like a sworn statement, so they have to have a signature on it. And then again at the top I wrote name, date of birth. So there's 2 examples here. So the one on the left is good for the language of what to include in the letter, and the one on the right has a better demonstration of having the date that you wrote it down, putting all the person's information, but it is in Spanish, so I wanted to include an example of better language for submitting. And then the next part, proof of citizenship. If someone is a U.S. citizen, just a birth certificate, or it's really important for someone who is a qualified non-citizen to include their green card that has the date they've been a legal permanent resident, or if they came in as a refugee and then transitioned to a legal permanent resident, that status is reflected on the green card, and that'll be really important to include as well. And then proof of pregnancy, this is just a pregnancy confirmation form. Again, notice that it's labeled, has a due date. It's very simple. So for delay appeals, just like my tips and tricks, a lot of applicants who are undocumented end up having to file delay appeals because it's taking a long time. So say a pregnant woman applies for Cover Kids and she's undocumented. If you're helping someone apply, maybe mark to look at it after 45 days and make sure that it's been reviewed within there. Also, in the fax, I always address any high-risk medical issues, including high-risk or late-term pregnancy. So if I'm having a delay appeal for someone who is due in 2 weeks and really desperately needs coverage, make sure to include that in the fax so that when it's reviewed, the urgency is communicated. I have label, label, label. I keep touching on this, but every single time you submit something having the name, date of birth, any identification information so that it gets put into the right file. There's so many people applying for TennCare and appealing to TennCare, and you want to make sure that if you go through all this work to put this together, it gets to the right place. And then also keep households together when possible. So if you have multiple appeals, put them in the same section, include them together so that mom and child don't get separated and you have an issue later on. Okay, filing an eligibility appeal. It's the same 3 steps: completing the form, what to include, anticipating the state's response, and I've just included some tweaks for eligibility specifically. So you're going to complete the form the exact same way for all the other parts, and under number 5, you're going to either mark I was denied coverage, so you would mark this if you applied for TennCare and were denied, or my coverage ended or is ending, and this would be, say, a redetermination issue. You got a notice that your coverage is being terminated, but you had coverage previously. And this one is super important. Has your coverage ended? Is your coverage ending? Especially with redetermination, if your coverage is ending, check, yes, I want continuation of benefits. Same items for what to include, so I'm not going to go over it again with barcode, fax page, appeal form. I will give sample what to include fax. So once again, I go through, I say who the person is, I say I'm filing an eligibility appeal on her behalf. Once again, I detail how the person is eligible. And I want to point out, really important, I write, because this appeal is being filed prior to her coverage ending, please ensure that Ms. Doe receives continuation of benefits during the review of her appeal. So even though I marked the box on the appeal form, I once again put this in writing with the fax form that I want continuation of benefits for the client to make sure that there's multiple instances where the client directly asks for continuation of benefits. Anticipating the state's response. Proof of application isn't as important with this one. If you have it, it doesn't hurt to send in, but I wouldn't worry about it as much. Proof of income, proof of citizenship, and pregnancy confirmation, if that's relevant, are important since those are factors in determining eligibility. So once again, make sure that they're labeled, have all the information, and send those along. So tips and tricks for eligibility appeals in particular. Once again, I keep hitting on this, but ask for continuation of benefits. It's not going to be given to someone just because they appeal. You have to directly ask for it, and I think it's best to ask for it in multiple ways. For eligibility appeals, the additional documents being sent are especially important. It just helps speed up the process. If you file an eligibility appeal and don't send proof of income, or they haven't previously requested proof of income, then you're going to have TennCare request proof of income and have to wait another few weeks when they review that proof of income. So it really just speeds up the process for the client, and it gets them a decision faster by sending more of this information. Pay attention to gross income. If you're helping someone and they seem like they're on the border of being eligible or not, just double check that they are telling you or reporting the gross income and not their income after taxes, just to save yourself an issue if they go through a whole process with an eligibility appeal when they weren't eligible in the first place. And once again, address any high-risk medical issues. Just communicate urgency if it's relevant. And then the last one is filing an effective date appeal. Same 3 steps with slight tweaks. So completing the form. Again, complete the form the same way you did for all the other appeals. And then under number 5, you're going to mark my start date for my coverage is wrong. So just as a refresher, effective date appeals are if someone gets approved for TennCare or Cover Kids or whatever, and it says your start effective date is, say, June 3rd when it was supposed to be May 6th, then you can appeal to have that backdated. Again, including the same information, personal barcode, fax page, appeal form, explanation of the fax, and your authorization of representative organization form. Personal barcode, fax page, and we just did appeal form all stay the same, first 3 parts. For fax, this one's a little bit shorter. I'm writing on behalf of our client. She was eligible. She's approved for Cover Kids with the incorrect effective date of, in this example, August 14. She had applied for coverage on June 25th, and I assisted her with filing a delay appeal. That may or may not be relevant. I've attached the proof of her application from June. Please correct her effective date of coverage to June 25th, 2019. So for anticipating stage response for this one, the most important one is proof of application. If you don't have the other forms, they're really not necessary. The individual's already been deemed eligible, but you need to prove through a fax receipt or a screenshot of a TennCare Connect page. If the person applied over the phone, that is sometimes a little bit more complicated, but if they remember the date that they applied, and even better, if they remember the name of the person they spoke with, then you can include that in the fax to say the person applied on this date, they spoke with Susie at TennCare, and they helped her fill out the application. Tips and tricks, circle or star the date on the proof of original application. It sounds kind of silly, but I have had situations where I submit a proof application and it's a fax form that has multiple things going on, and I call TennCare and they say, oh no, this is the date, and it'll have been the date I sent it in. I'm like, well, no, look at the date that says the fax receipt was. Post-decision follow-up. Verify correct effective date if someone's approved, so that you know if you need an effective date appeal. Check for their insurance card in the mail. Have TennCare cover any bills from backdated coverage, so make sure that the individual contacts their provider and asks them to send bills to TennCare. If TennCare will not cover or they have any other issues, the individual can file a medical services appeal and mark that bills are not being paid. And last but not least, always report changes in income, household size, address, pregnancy status, employment, et cetera, right away to TennCare so that they can prevent future issues.
Okay, thanks. We're going to open it up for some questions. You can submit those via the chat box. So we'll take a look and see if you've got any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we really have any questions. Please feel free to email either Lauren or myself if you have questions about any of the information that was covered in today's webinar. We will distribute the slides so that you can actually have copies of everything that was presented today. That will be especially helpful if you need a little guidance when it comes to actually completing appeal forms or what to really contain in an eligibility letter to accompany the appeal. So once again, thanks for joining us on the webinar today, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, are we off?
Nope.